You go ahead.
Okay, I would like to call the meeting to order of the curriculum committee. It is Tuesday, July 19th. It's 8:35 a.m. and we are at Education Service Center. This is a committee meeting which does not include public comment or interaction during the meeting. The meeting is open to all who would like to observe and will be videotaped and placed on our website.
Thank you.
Let me say who we are.
Yes.
Okay, I'm Melanie Meergat, school board member.
Tommy Schmidt, school board member. Laura Jackson, assistant superintendent of teaching and learning.
Emily Mustard, Director of Student Services. Dr. Jill Reese, K-8 Education.
Erin Faust, Program Administrator for the Curriculum Department.
Jill Corbett, Student Services Program Administrator.
Our first discussion item is the annual curriculum plan, and that was prepared by Laura Jackson and Dr. Jill Reese.
So today we're going to talk about the annual curriculum plan, and this is one of our annual processes. We're going to just kind of review some of the things included in that annual curriculum plan. And so the first thing is like, what does it include and why do we do it? We have state statutes and state administrative rules that direct the districts to annually present and for the board to approve an annual curriculum plan. And what that plan needs to include is a sequential order of instructions, a sequential curriculum plan. And what that's defined by is what courses are and learning targets are students exposed to. So it includes course content, course objectives, and then how are we assessing the students? How do we know what they know? It also, the curriculum plan also includes information on how do we review and evaluate the curriculum on an ongoing basis. So we do this plan each year in accordance with the statute, but also with our board policy. So our board policy 330 talks about the annual curriculum. And we are going to kind of run through some, a little further definition, and then we'll walk through one particular area as an example of these features. So the curriculum, when we're talking about the curriculum, we're talking about the order that things happen in, the order of learning. That the curriculum is an organized set of learning experiences for our students, and then it builds upon the level of rigor, the knowledge and skills that students are acquiring as they go through our earliest learning experiences up through graduation. A curriculum plan and the curriculum also includes the objectives and the course content. So what are the objectives we're learning, and what are the themes that are helping us to learn those objectives? What are the resources we're using to support? And we use our universal resources that every student has. And with our teacher expertise, if the student has already mastered that content, they'll pull in some additional resources to support a more complex level of development on that same topic. Or if a student needs additional practice or has to really solidify some skills that may have been precursor skills to what they're learning now, that teacher will pull in some other resources to support those individual students. And but for our universal curriculum, we identify specific resources. We also talk about the time that's allocated for students to acquire those skills. And then again, how are we evaluating our students and how are we evaluating the curriculum? So when we talk about the sequential order, we have K-8 by grade level, and they're aligned to the board adopted standards. We'll have a primary resource for mathematics. In our 4K program, we use Teaching Strategy Gold. In grades K through 5, we use the Bridges Math curriculum as our primary resource. In grades 6, all the way through advanced algebra, It's College Preparatory Mathematics, or CPM Math. And so those are our university adopted resources for mathematics as it goes through school. We identify a specific sequence, K-8, pre-K-8, excuse me. And we'll explain this document later in the presentation, but I'm going to scroll down to, this page has all the grade levels on. So here's math across, I think right now I'm actually in kindergarten. And then for grade 1, here are the units in mathematics. I can scroll down further and you'll see it 6th grade. So this shifts our resource to a different resource, and again, the units of instruction throughout the year. This document also shows the timing in the year that the units are occurring. So this gives that sequence in a unit and throughout the year. And this is a quick year at a glance overview. At the high school level, the sequence is different because kids enter at different spots. We may have a student whose mathematical development had them taking geometry in 8th grade. Then they're not starting over in high school in algebra, they're moving on to advanced algebra. A student is on a typical trajectory and may enter high school at algebra, but they may enter at different points. So we have a course planning guide where our students select the course that they're going to take, and they can, some of them have prerequisites, so they continue in that sequence, and some are required, some are optional. So the high school course planning guide is really the spot where that sequence occurs, but it's so individualized based on where the student is starting. So that will look a little different. But let's, I picked 2 grade levels to kind of go through the standards overview and what that sequence might look like. At different points in the standards, the cluster areas change. And so in grade 4, operations and algebraic thinking is a cluster of standards, numbered operations in base 10 is a cluster of standards, and fractions is a cluster of standards. Our course overview for grade 4 talks about math focusing on these critical areas. And then our grade 8 standards overview includes these clusters, the number system, expressions and equations, and functions. Very different than the 4th grade clusters, and because of the difference in rigor and the difference in what students are working on. And then our 8th grade course overview for mathematics includes the description of what students are doing in CPM Math. Core Connections is the book title for CPM. High school mathematics, this image here that talks about the graduation requirement being 3 credits, lists mathematics courses that are in the course planning guide. And if you enter at algebra, a typical sequence is here where you can see students veering off on choice. Again, as I said, a student might enter 9th grade already here in advanced algebra, having completed algebra and geometry, and they have a variety of choices to make. So that isn't, yeah.
So are algebra and geometry taken in at Badger?
Algebra and geometry are taken at the high school. However, if a student has mastered all of it, a student who may have taken the 7th and 8th grade math in 7th grade would be taking algebra in 8th grade. So it's the high school course that they take as an 8th grader. And that's a portion of our students in each year, anywhere from 20 to sometimes it might be 2 sections of algebra or more.
So, is AP Calc
A, B, and then BC, is that each a semester? So that you could do geometry freshman year, advanced algebra sophomore year, pre-calc honors junior year, and then the AP calc senior year?
You started with geometry in freshman year. Yep, you could, they're year-long courses.
Because I'm assuming they're all prerequisites of each other. So in order to
There are
get
some
through.
there are some that you can take geometry and advanced algebra.
At the,
Okay,
and you could take geometry and algebra at the same time. So, if you wanted to do that, you could take algebra and geometry at the same time. Our students who have that, so that's a conversation like our gifted and talented team would have with families as well. For students who have really shown that they have this drive. Our counselors would also be prepared to have that conversation with students as well.
I guess I'm
Parent
just thinking of like what's the typical math progression for a student that takes math every year in high school?
So the typical would be algebra, geometry, advanced algebra. And then if they're doing pre-calc or AP stats or, those are some of those options they have. A student might take the intro to algebra 2 instead of advanced algebra. That's an option they have as well.
I'm just trying to find myself on here
Uh-huh.
from when I was in high school, and I would not consider myself gifted and talented,
Uh-huh.
and yet I still took a year of math every year because I went into engineering.
So you're encouraged by the counselors to take math every single year if you're going on, especially to afford your college.
And
So you might take pre-calc, you could take pre-calc and advanced algebra simultaneously, if you wanted to. And, but they are year-long courses.
Is it required to take a math course every year?
Your, graduation requirements requires 3 credits. Students are really encouraged. So if you had a student who took 2 credits of high school math while at Badger, they could enter high school, take 1 class, and have met their graduation requirement, but that's a very long time to go without mathematics instruction. So they're still encouraged, even though they've met the math requirement, to continue to take mathematics all the way
Because you would think somebody that got that far ahead, early on would want to keep going, so.
through. Yeah. Tanya, any other questions about this? Sequence?
I guess it sounds like you're mentioning a lot of exceptions, but I guess it would be nice if there was something more standard. At least more clear, I guess. I mean, obviously it's nice that we accommodate exceptions, but,
I'm wondering if it would be helpful,
Yeah,
like, as you
the
take
4-year
this
plan.
to the board, even just to highlight in a different color the typical progression. So the typical
like
progression,
80% of students.
Yep,
take, for example,
algebra,
calculate.
geometry, advanced algebra, pre-calc. I mean, I think where it gets to be a little more ambiguous is once you move past those first 3 options of algebra, geometry, advanced algebra, I think,
It's why are they making the choices they're making?
yeah,
And-
exactly.
Yeah.
But I would say that's pretty standard for the first 3.
There are some business math classes as well that kids might go into, that are on through the business department, right?
Right, well, and I think the public would like to see most kids take, some math every year. And, the fact that you can finish it up really early, I don't think that, it just doesn't look good, I mean, that's an exception, and also
Very small
even
percentage.
and even doubling up, because the reason why doubling up for geometry and advanced algebra, even though you can take them simultaneously, that takes away from kids taking other elective classes. So I I'm only speculating that doesn't happen very often, I could be wrong, but,
And the kids that are doing that are probably the kids who are really aligned to a post-high school experience that values mathematics. So like engineering, a kid who's like all on board, I'm gonna be an engineer, I wanna take as much math as I can, they might do that. But I agree with you, I think it's less likely.
I guess the reason why I bring it up is because I don't think it's special to want to take math every year. And I don't like it being presented as, oh, you're exceptional. Like, to me, that's just normal.
Yeah,
And I would like,
Oh, that it's exceptional to take math every year?
Yeah.
No, that is highly encouraged by our counselors.
Okay.
It's not required, graduation requirement, statute requirement is 3 credits of math in high school. But, it's strongly encouraged that we take math.
okay.
The other piece that's really important is that ACT, when students take it, is heavy calculus focused. And so if students don't get, and the counselors help kids with that, don't get into the calculus arena, by the time they take the ACT, it's not gonna help them on the ACT, so that's also really important.
Yeah, I would like, when this is presented, I would like to make sure that we explain that we value and encourage math every year. So even if you're not,
Even at our
Perhaps
junior
we
meetings,
should-
we have a lot of conversations with students at our junior meetings, heavy about, we know you don't need 3 credits. However, like placement tests, if you're going to have to take for test school and college, really encourage you to keep those math skills fresh and alert. We really highlight that as an important piece in the placement test for grader. And there's such a big chunk of kids going out of school, that's pretty important to them.
well, and math is just a skill that people use in real life, whether they realize it or not. You know, I mean, I know it's one of those, oh, what am I gonna use calculus? I didn't know you would use, you know, it's how, it changes how your brain thinks, and, we are, as a society, we've heard criticism about not spending enough time on encouraging math. So I just don't want in your presentation to the board for it to sound like, oh, well, yeah, we've got, it's great that we can highlight these, you know, AP classes and everything, but we also don't want it to sound like there's this huge gap in between the remedial and the exceptional and gifted and talented. You know, where is 80% of the kids? And what do we do? And
I'll include a typical, I'm going to take the chart off and just include typical trajectory.
okay. Thank you. Yeah, the public wants to see that we are serving all the kids with math that will help them in their, go on with their life.
But in this, you're just only pointing out the math as an example,
As
right?
an example.
Right.
Correct. Of how the sequence goes through from. So our instructional time, what is the time dedicated to instruction overall during the year? Our bell schedules are up here, not the full bell schedule, the start and end of the day to say this is the length of time that our students are in school each day. We do, high school, middle school, Silverbrook all have specific bell schedules within. At the elementary level, each schedule is designed at the classroom level, but we have district-wide expectations about how much time is spent in each curricular area. So, in order to identify what those learning targets are for our courses every year, we have the annual notice of academic standards. And so the board approved at the last board meeting, but it's just the list of standards, and this one is just showing mathematics and then has a link to the math standards. So these are the standards that we're operating with in the district. And then the grade level outcomes that we're looking for and really targeting and wanting to make sure our students have these mastered as they're exiting one grade level or one course and going on to the next. Our big picture is given to us by the standards, and then we work with them to develop those. So those standards are then linked on course overviews. And so one piece is how is this information accessible to families? And where can families access that? And we have moved away from BYOC over a year ago now. And so linked on our website, some of these are going to be new to be linked on the website. We've always had the course overviews on there. At the high school level, the course overview highly resembles the course planning guide. And again, same order. But then for each course, it linked in here is the master syllabus for the course, which includes all of the items required. It's too small to split the document. It's a master syllabus which lists all of the elements required in a course overview. The broad goals of the course, the units of study in the order they'll happen, primary resources, and how students will be assessed, and then the standards that are worked on during that course, so the standards that are guiding the instruction in that course. And so at the high school level, it resembles the course planning. The course planning guide, again, is where you can see all of the courses offered in the whole district for 9-12, but also look at sequences. We do have a 4-year planning document in there that talks about what would you take freshman year, sophomore year, junior year. So I will revise that trajectory for so lots of choice when you get in the upper levels. Let's take a closer look at the lower levels. And the curriculum department has done a lot of work on these documents over the last year. And so Dr. Jill Reese is really going to talk about these individual documents. So the first one on the list is the year at a glance. And Jill, do you want me just to click here? And if you don't mind, just tell me what you want to highlight on them.
I think you can kind of just scroll through it, Laura. If you look, these are all things that are going to be listed in our curriculum page on the website. And so this just goes through kind of an overview of the K-8. Similarly, Laura showed a little bit of this before where it's listed by month and then it's listed by each subject area and then what the students are learning throughout the year, the big topic areas. And so then it goes through the content areas and then it goes through each grade level. So it's pretty comprehensive in showing just kind of all the different things that are going on. In conjunction with this, then thank you, Laura. We created some parent guides. And so we have some parent guides that for each grade level K-8 that look like I think, Laura, you have to open you have to open the PDF version.
Oh, I know what, I'm sorry, I apologize. I did open it with Google Docs so that it was, you're right, when I opened it with Google Docs, that messed it up. We have them in PDF that will be used. So let me go
Yeah,
back.
just pick
to
it right
PDF.
out, that doesn't matter.
I'll have to remove those from the file. Okay.
So we have these, the team of us created these overview family guides. And so basically what they are is it really just goes through, it's sort of a more visually pleasing document than that big spreadsheet we had before. But it goes through then kind of what kindergartners are expected to know and be able to do by the end of the year. So it goes through each of the content areas and then it gives some just kind of parent suggestions for helping with learning at home too. Nothing super hardcore, but just some things that would help as students are learning. So it goes through each specific area and takes away kind of the big ideas and the thinking that students are going to need to accomplish by the end of the school year. So we've done that K-8. I don't think we did a pre-K one, which we probably need to do that now that I think about it. But we haven't put those out yet. We hope to link these on the website for parents to have access to them. The other piece too is, I believe, as we're transitioning families into the district and bringing new students in. Also, any work we do with families, I think this will be very helpful for them. So I just wonder if you guys have any questions about it or any thoughts on anything we can do to add to these or things we need to adjust.
I did want to see something, and I don't know if it fits into this exact part of the
Yeah.
presentation or where it fits, but talking about like the course, like planning and overview documents, how it'll have like kind of an outline of what kids are learning or, you know, in the different sections.
That's
Is that coming next? I'll wait, should I wait till I? I wanted to say that, like, I think it would be important to include any controversial topics on the outline, because I feel like sometimes things can get hidden, like there could be some, you know, like maybe some political advocacy stuff under like making an impact, or, you know, like the title might be so broad that parents might not actually know if there's something being taught in that unit that would be controversial. You know,
So-
like,
Okay, you bring up a
remove
good
those
point.
things.
well, yeah, I do. I mean, I agree with that. I agree there's certain things that maybe shouldn't even be taught. But if it is going to be taught, it needs to be expressed, you know, like the parents need to know so that they can opt out, or if that needs to be done, you know. Maybe make it too annoying to have to let people know all the time that it wouldn't be taught,
Well,
right?
but if it's not there, then
Then you
you're
don't-
supposed to
Right.
say there's some.
Controversial to me may not be controversial.
Right.
You may not be, you know,
Right.
that's a different opinion.
Right,
So one of the things, Melanie, is, Laura has up on the screen kind of a unit scope and sequence plan. And so all of the content areas, K-8 are working on getting these ready, and then social studies is working on getting these ready too. In addition to that, there is board policy on controversial topics. And so we are working on a, it's not called controversial topics, but sensitive topics.
Yeah.
Course that we're gonna ask all teachers to take and sign off on. And that's gonna be a new thing for fall. We're working through one of our systems that has, sort of like a webinar where people have to take assessments as they go through it and then kind of sign off at the end. And so we're building that. And so we will be building that for everybody to take this fall. So that kind of goes along with what you're saying,
What
but
the controversial topics are. You know, like,
yeah,
like you said, like obviously.
Well,
it's
so
gonna
for
be
you
different
to
for every
determine as a
person.
Yeah.
parent what
Right.
you consider to be
Right.
controversial topics,
Right.
you can't, I mean, all they could do is present what topics will be covered.
right.
Right.
And then each parent gets to decide for themselves if they want to dig in further
Yeah,
personally, but it would be, how would it even be possible to highlight,
yeah.
you know, what one group considers controversial and another versus another? I mean, the complexity of that would be,
Sure.
how would you do that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, I guess it would have to be determined like what the topics are that might be controversial to certain people, or if there's certain ones that are often, like, I mean, we're all educated people and
Yeah.
like, you know what kind of topics you.
So in the policy, Melanie,
Yeah.
it's not like a list of things, but it
Right.
mentions some specific things. So we're building that course based on the things in that policy. And I can't remember the exact language, but there's something about political views and things,
Sure.
you know, so there's things like that. So the course that people will take will hit kind of all those buttons, so to speak.
So would that would we see that to here, like before the board, before something like that would be put out for the teachers? You know what I'm saying, like what the.
Probably not.
Here, not before
Yeah, it's like, it's literally in the same system we do bloodborne pathogens in. So you take the course and quiz and bloodborne pathogens, you quiz, and then, the district can see who took it and all of those, and then it was completed. This is a little different than that, in that it's, informational about, process and procedure and what to do if you have a controversy. We don't bring those things forward for board approval or anything like that. And we hadn't, had a conversation about talking about that at the curriculum committee. But, we would certainly be able to make that available to you.
And we did go through social emotional learning and remove everything
Right.
that was controversial. We went through the health section. We talked about what was, so if there,
We went through
is,
social studies and.
yeah, there is something, we've already handled it. We've removed it. So to try to,
And literacy instructional resources have gone through the board last year. So our teachers are utilizing those resources within these clusters of units. Their individual newsletter, I would encourage parents to always look at their teacher newsletter and to ask any questions of their teacher directly if they're wondering about something. But as far as what is required in the course overview document, it's not to list every word for word detail of the course, but it is really, here are the units of study, and these do have the information in. In some areas where we are still working on revising, we will have our old BYOC documents linked up. So for example, we'll get into the course revision process, but looking at our K-4 teachers and all of the new work they're doing, we couldn't ask them to also start a new social studies curriculum at the same time because it's too much. So while we may have been looking at that, originally thinking we were gonna look at that last year, we're not. We're moving that down the road a little bit to get them really working with their new literacy resources and really going through that improvement literacy instruction, right? So, so those old BYOC documents will be picked up in some areas. And those really have much more in them than what is required in the course overview document. I always encourage families to, or board members, to ask if they want to talk about more. But there are, like, we don't ever put the assessments out ahead of time for obvious reasons. Because for obvious reasons. But sticking with what's included here, we'll keep this the way it is, but I think it was really important that Dr. Jill brought up the controversy of the sensitive topics course that really, and that is designed to really make sure we're thinking about it. And as we re-enter into a new school year, let's really be thinking about this, really cognizant of that. And to, I think the point that Tommy was making, we have such diversity in viewpoints that knowing ahead of time, if you haven't had conversations with every parent in every class, you don't know what someone will for sure view as controversial, because sometimes things that are, that someone considers you wouldn't have known that. And so I really encourage our parents to really stay informed, read the teacher newsletters, read the school newsletters, so they do know what's coming on, and then ask the question. People are working with the best of intentions, so don't hesitate to ask.
we would have to potentially put controversial on every single one. That doesn't work either. So it's what's more important is what Dr. Reese is doing with educating our staff on how to present things in a sensitive way.
Laura, can you show like the 8 overview, just so they can kind of see the, what it looks like? when
This
it's all-
one
No,
or
the,
or course overview?
yeah. Yeah, so this is, we are working on this. There's, if you click on it, there's areas that are finished, and then there's areas, like if you look at social studies, that we're still working on, right? So some of it's in the works, some of it is, some of the old UIOC topics, and then some of it is brand new. So it's in the works, but hopefully we'll have that done shortly and be able to list that on the website too. As you can see then, those parent curriculum guides go along. They're actually a little bit more,
Go ahead.
they're actually a little bit more updated and forward facing because they have the more 21, 22 and beyond information on them. So we're working on taking kind of the standards language from here and putting it into those unit plans and curriculum plans. So it's all kind of one big system, but we're trying to get it all loaded so everybody can see what we're doing and parents can see and the community can see in all those spaces.
So with these items, going to be linked on the district webpage, then our parents will be able to access the information readily. Our community will be able to access it readily, and in a variety of ways. What is it you're looking for? Those, the curriculum guides, the family curriculum guides, really give that broad overview of what's my child going to learn. The year at a glance gives you the units in order, and the course overview gives you kind of everything together, the standards, the units of order, and pieces. Dr. Jill?
I don't think so, and then just the parent guides is that extra piece also.
Any other questions about this section? Okay, so the last page on the slide, in the slide deck, talks about curriculum cycles. And in the interest of not having too many words on the page, I did not put everything on here, but you have a document that looks like this in your packet. And so within here, we as a system have different phases that our curriculum is in each year. And we make a long-range plan, but sometimes there are shifts and adjustments to that plan. Some of those shifts and adjustments happen when we're partnering with someone. So we didn't list in a year-by-year plan our transcripted credit courses that we work with Moraine Park to provide. Because when Moraine Park is doing their curriculum review, it may not flow with our cycle. And we, if our kids are to be able to earn college credit, we stay updated with them. Same thing with AP, they'll update a new curriculum and then we review. So we look at some of those things outside of this cycle. We just did ProStart, which is our culinary curriculum. And in reviewing our culinary curriculum, we had that on the plan for a number of years, but we were waiting with some recent updates in the certification process and standards. So we took those out of the cycle because they're dependent on outside factors. And within our phases are really the areas of curriculum that we continue to monitor and review, revise on an annual basis. So we have several phases, and this slide just highlights the labeling of the phases. Each phase is further explained. So what does it mean to adopt a plan? What does it mean to be in the monitoring phase? Where you're really watching to see what progress has been made as a result of the changes and how our students are doing. We move on to monitoring to also making adjustments to the curriculum and then reviewing that progress, reviewing standards, reviewing the resource itself. And then we have an opportunity to review and make recommendations. So that recommendation may be for a new resource, which then takes us into the adoption plan. On the chart that you have, I have a section grayed out because that shows the 21-22 school year and where we were at the start. In August last year, we brought forward a curriculum plan and looked at this is what we intended to do. Well, we made some adjustments along the way during the year. And so those are reflected in the plan going forward. When I bring this to the board, I'll take off the 21-22 so that we can fully go to 27-28 school year on here and highlight what we're working on during the 22-23 school year. It always feels a little jumbled when you're seeing all these dates.
I really like it when you present what the full cycle, so that people don't wonder, well, when are you gonna look at this? It's like, well, there actually is, we're not avoiding it, there's a plan, because you can't do everything at once. There's so much happening. And I think people make the mistake of assuming we can fix everything all at the same time.
And there are other things that make us say, okay, hold on and wait. Like we know this, the health standards are the state, we're expecting to hear some information from them now, so really, like, let's see what that does, because if that's gonna change our direction at all, we don't wanna, you know.
It's a very reasonable explanation.
We had that same conversation about K-4 social studies too, because that was initially potentially on the docket for next year, but if you think about what's going on with those teachers, they've had all new literacy curriculum this year in reading and in writing. And in addition, they're getting 2 digital tools for math and 2 for literacy. So they have a lot on their plates. And if you think about the way they teach everything, right? So they're not teaching like a certain subject area. So to bring that in another new curriculum the next year, it's a lot. So we just have to be considerate of those pieces too when we look at these cycles, because we could do boom, boom, boom every year, but it can be really hard on the people that are using it.
So we try to be responsive to that, so you'll see, we make a projection of the maybe adjustments again.
Yep.
So this, Nancy Kunkel, who is our communications manager, has taken this document and, which is linked up here, I'm gonna click on here just so it shows it for the, so she has made this in a different format so that you can see just in 22, 23, this is what we're focusing on. 23, 24, this is what we're 1 year at a time. We will link these, we will link that information onto the webpage as well. That way people can look ahead. And again, it may be revised each year based on what we do as well as some outside measures. Are there any questions about the curriculum cycles? Any questions, period? I'll make that adjustment to the presentation. And then all of the documents, like on this slide here, would be, when we put it into Board Docs, these will all be available to people in Board Docs too.
So will it be at the next board meeting?
Not the 25th, but
Okay.
the first meeting in August
Okay,
and the second meeting in August.
okay, so the August board docs and the general information in the agenda that you'll be able to find these links.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct, in August. I didn't know what we would have for changes and recommendations, so I didn't want to put it 25th.
Yeah, no, that's fine, I just want, right, anybody watching at home, where to find these links. They're available to everyone, the entire world. In our board docs
For the August
agenda, yeah,
Yes.
the August meetings.
I think it would be nice if we could link at least one parent guide in the Board Docs.
And yeah,
As
I
a
agree.
sample. Any
This
grade
one?
level?
Yeah, it was like student.
Yeah, grade 4.
All right, I'm going to close a few tabs before Jill Corbett and Emily Melstrand present, so that it doesn't slow down.
And Laura, maybe I will drive the mouse.
I think that sounds like a great idea.
All right,
Yeah.
I'll drive the mouse.
Just to make it easier so that we're talking to your back.
What's that?
Do you guys mind if I stay here to talk?
Oh, I'm okay with looking at this.
That one? Okay.
Yeah,
Are you ready with that?
yeah.
So I'll get us started and then I'm gonna turn it over to Jill.
Okay.
What we are gonna talk about today, what we're offering for discussion is an overview of our district at-risk plan. And we're gonna focus primarily grades 6 and up in this discussion, as that's kind of what is directed through the Department of Public Instruction. But we'll also talk a little bit about what that looks like at the earlier levels in early childhood and even pre-K. And Jill is the program administrator for student services, and she is so knowledgeable about all of the different programming that we do to serve students who are considered at risk. That's a primary focus of her job in that role. So I'm actually gonna let Jill, she's gonna lead. She is far more articulate about this particular subject, and then I'll jump in and add, extra thoughts and such, and then there'll be an opportunity just for discussion and such as well, okay? And I'll attempt to drive this
All
home.
right. You do have in your packet, we did provide you with, kind of like the overview plan, but we create a little PowerPoint to kind of, we feel, puts it kind of easier, user-friendly manner, and then highlight some of our programming. It would have been like the last thing.
There we go.
Got it?
Thank you.
Okay. As I said, I do have prettier copies, but, so we just started off in that packet, it's the same type of thing. It's really, what is our requirement for the state? What does the state say that we need to address? So we just put these up here as our kind of guidelines, so you guys understand what is our guidance that we follow. This is kind of the minimum that districts have to do. So again, just developing the staff who's responsible, and that kind of falls on myself and Emily to really kind of look at this plan and develop and roll it out. Making sure there's work-based learning experiences, programs, and activities. That there's curriculum modification alternative programs that align with graduation requirements. We want to also make sure that we are notifying families and our schools are actively understanding who are your students really truly that are considered at risk in the eyes of the state. Making sure that we have adequate access to all students that are eligible, like making sure they understand what's out there, what we have, what we could provide. And then also just ensuring that special ed and related services, so that 504, that are provided for eligible students. So again, we know those are kind of past that students with at risk, but we understand that there's this continuum that we are looking at. So that again is just kind of our basic requirements that we want to make sure we hit and highlight. So our goals, our basic goal, understanding that our goal for everyone in our system is always to graduate, right? That's our big goal. But within that, my heart always tells me there's a lot more to that. I don't want you just to graduate. I want you to graduate and have a plan. I want you to be successful past graduation, right? So in order for us to say that students are going to stay in school, enter programs, be part of it, we do feel that we need to really make sure that they have a sense of belonging in our school environment, that they feel connected to whether it's a school, a program, whatever. That's our biggest thing, because we all know attendance rate impacts graduation, right? So why would you attend if you don't feel connected to something? Again, reducing the amount of academic failures and dropouts, even meaning failures of classes and things like that. So we do have within our system, you will see we have programs within that tries to capture and recoup some of those credits if they are lost early on, to avoid having to use, as many students have to go into alternate programs or be at risk to fail. We want to make sure that we provide targeted proactive interventions to students that are identified. So again, early on, making sure that we have plans, not waiting it out, okay? And their biggest thing is involving anyone who is needed in that plan to help that student find some success. Obviously, first and foremost, that's the parent and the guardians. But we do know that some of these families require some community wraparound, in building wraparound teams besides just the core teacher. So for us, that's kind of our goals that we want to, that we push to all our buildings to try to provide for. So what we want to do in this slide is, for anyone who doesn't know basically the state definition of who is considered a student that is at risk, what makes them a student at risk. So up here it talks about, and again, the state really highlights that 5 through 12. So again, when we're doing this, we are targeting a lot of our 5th through 12th graders in this presentation, but we know that we are doing a lot of proactive interventions at our younger ages too. So when you look at this, it's kind of like the at-risk is considered students, again, that are not graduating, because that's our big target, right? So you have to have 2 or more of the following things below. So that you're 1 or more years behind their age grade in credits. And we do have a formula for our high school credits that talks about if you are a grade behind, a semester behind, that you are 2 or more years behind in your basic skill levels. That's really more of our, when we're doing our our district testing, state testing, things like that. We're targeting some of that, as well as feedback from teachers on how they're doing in their unit assessment and classroom expectations. Habitual truancy, again, we know that is a big impact. If you're not attending, it's hard to learn, right, when you're not there. School age parents is, yes, we do not have a lot, but obviously that's a big impact to any person. If you become a young parent, that does impact your day and what time you have available for learning. And then adjudicated delinquents. We do have students within our system that have had to serve time, and whether it's in residential facilities, whether it's in our juvenile detention center, and that all impacts your access to the regular classroom, right? You're being educated in those environments, but it is different, and at times, if you have you're getting less of the time in the classroom, right? As well as when you come back, how do we get you back and caught up? How do we get you back feeling belonging? How do we get you back on track just in general? And that's usually a big team thing that we have to do, because you have now a lot of community members wrapped around you, so making sure we are connecting with all of them. And then again, one of our biggest things is just our 8th grade scores and how those 8th grade tests come back, again, prior to high school, making sure that we are targeting and looking at those kids that fall below a certain percentile.
I just wanted to mention, and Jill, if you can expand on this a little bit, when Jill talks about adjudicated students who are incarcerated, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but we actually have a school site called Washington Street School, which is located at the Washington County Jail. Would you, just because I know, Melanie is a new board member, I just want her to know,
Maybe briefly, a little.
I mean, some people are familiar that it exists. But I think that's a really important program when I think about, reducing the likelihood of dropout. I mean, those kids are so at risk for dropping out. And Jill actually oversees that program. Do you want to talk just real briefly, like what that means?
So state law states that if you have a juvenile detention center in your community, you are responsible for the education. So that's how we kind of grabbed in and have a school within a school in our juvenile detention center. We actually have 2 classrooms that we run there with 4 staff members, as well as we are responsible for 18 to 21-year-olds upstairs who are wanting to continue their high school education and have not completed. We have some overflow rooms if needed as well. Students come anywhere between 1 hour and 6 months. We do not have outdoor access in that process, so we cannot go over usually 6 months unless there's a court order special circumstances. So typical students this year, every year it changes, depends on the judges and what's going on in the system. A typical student's there about 30 days. So we do have some rotating, obviously, students that we have to adjust to. We serve students from age 10 to 21. Our juvenile detention center has 10 to 17 and a half, and then our adults are the 17 and a half to 21. That's a big range, right? So when you get kids, it's constant flexibility of how do I split groups on a daily basis, who can and can't be with each other. We do run a school day from 8 to 2:30. We do math, reading, writing, and then we rotate social studies and science. We also do, we bring in art, we bring in Phi-Ed, we bring in some music, and we as well do some stuff with character development and like errors in thinking, things like that. Just helping them really think of that a better way that they could have handled situations, understanding themselves, the law. So again, we have 2 teachers that are, ironically, they're both teachers that have background in special education, but they're also teachers that have their ABRIS license. And then we have 2 aid paraprofessionals that work in conjunction. Typically, there's about, this year we had a little higher numbers, 10 to 12 students in there at one time, is it typical? I will tell you, we serve, yes.
that not all the students originate from West Bend, correct?
So I was just going to say that. So we serve, the state, well, 5 years ago, the state had approximately 15 to 17 juvenile detention centers based just due to funding, numbers, and as well as a state, we're trying not to do lockups, we're trying to do wraparound services. So numbers have gone down, around the state, not in our particular facility, because they closed a lot of doors. So we're down to 11 facilities in the state of Wisconsin, which we serve. We take all Waukesha girls. We take a lot of Kenosha, overflow Racine, overflow Dane County, overflow Fond du Lac. We do Ozaukee and Washington. And then we will get random Marinette, like just random across the state. I will tell you that our Washington County students probably make up 5 to 10% of our overall through the year. Our West Bend students probably are 1%. So, which is good, right? Good problem to have. But there's a lot of communication that has to go on for our staff with all the different school districts and schools that they're working with. But we do hold that, and in saying that, I mean, if we have students that are coming to us from West Bend School District or stay with us, we want to make sure that, again, the transition is we're getting some of their work to keep them up so that when they return, just like all of our students, they return in an okay spot and they're not falling in a hole. But that's a lot, again, communication, a lot of also helping that student understand that they could use this time to benefit them and come out in a better place. So a lot of times it's that kind of emotional reaction to get past, to get them to that point.
And I think it's important to mention, that program is reimbursed so that we have categorically that we gain for that program. It's a requirement, we're the county seat, so we're required to provide that service, but we're reimbursed at 101%. So that entire program is reimbursed categorically. Because I think, as a person out in the community, that might be a question that you would have in terms of we're servicing kids from all different counties, how does that impact? Right. And the other thing that I think is really important in terms of the complexity of that program is, Jill talked about the communication. I mean, obviously, we're really focusing hard on communication between that program and our school so that we can return kids, but we want that for every child who has a period of time where they're incarcerated. We want to be able to send kids back to Racine and be able to reintegrate and graduate and find a path forward. So there's a lot of complexity around that communication, as is true of all alternative or at-risk programming. I do want to mention, because I think that this is important to recognize in terms of at-risk identification. When you look at that list, I mean, you can kind of identify there's certain things that are very applicable 8th grade and up. We're not thinking about credit deficiency when you're in 2nd grade, but we are thinking about the second bullet point, you're functioning or performing 2 or more years behind your age group in basic skills. So we're already thinking about this as kids are entering elementary school. If we have a 1st grader who's significantly behind their peers, we're working through that multi-tiered system of support to provide interventions to prevent the likelihood that they gain that more of those descriptors apply to that student. And I think that's the part of the at-risk programming that really applies, early in the educational career of a child is how are we intervening? Habitual truancy. I mean, sometimes we are working with families of really young children to support them to be at school on time and consistently. So I just wanted to kind of bring that awareness that although we're talking primarily about our older kids, we're thinking about this immediately and trying to identify factors that might make a student more at risk as they move through the system.
So that kind of leads right into this when we talk about the multi-tiered system. So the visual is just kind of to help you guys understand, like the bottom tier 1, I'm sure you've seen some of these in past presentations when we talk about our academic, behavior, social, emotional. Tier 1 is like what all students have access to, right? We're really looking at least restrictive, that is provided for all students, that high quality classroom education. But they have access to that whole group, but also some small group within the classroom. Differentiation if needed in the instruction, maybe how it's presented, how they get to provide feedback from it. That, again, all access to all. That's the biggest thing. Like, everyone has the access. So that is where, though, we want to make sure that teachers are monitoring the progress of the students so that we can have a clear indication if we are seeing concerns in students. And we talk about that 2-year, falling behind or gap, whether it's academics, whether it's some behavioral, some social. We want to be able to identify it early on with these universal interventions. So you go to tier 2, and that's that small group that's, for whatever reason, is not performing with the typical interventions that are in the classroom. And that's when we start really coming up with developing school plans. Small groups are coming together. We call that our MTSS system, where we are coming together and we're identifying what is the student's need, what is the gap, and what do we need to do to help this student. And there's a range of stuff that we do, again, depending on the specific need of that student, whether it's an academic or social behavioral. But we want to make sure that we can get them the intervention and the instruction necessary to hopefully bridge that gap. One of the biggest things in that area is how do we give the accommodations and modifications as much as possible in that restricted environment. So try and keep them still in that classroom as much as possible. Now, are there going to be some times where kids need to get pulled for some intervention? Yes, there may be, right? But to the best of our ability, when we are developing those plans, we are always thinking about the classroom as the first place you want the kids to be and get some instruction. I just want to note, as you can see on the arrows, as everything, when we make this group smaller and smaller in the identification, the continuous parent communication is one of our biggest things. We know moving kids forward is, we need those parents on board and understanding where their child's at. So that communication just needs to continue to increase, as well as that collaborative problem solving. So again, what might start off as like a plan, monitoring and rotating about a month, as you get into tier 3, you get these really high risk kids, those communications need to be happening more often. We need to be monitoring more often, and we need to really look at that plan very specifically and what they're needing and not needing. That is the time when we look at that tier 3, especially when we're looking at our high, like our 6 through 12 and our high school kids. That's when probably the time when we would start saying, do we need to come up with alternative options? Is we've done, A through Y, do we need to look at Z as a possibility of an alternative placement? Again, starting off always that classroom first, and then that slow progression of possible removal for assistance to the possible alternative at-risk programming that we have in our district. And I will say, along the way, we have a lot of different things that are meant to try to capture. Things happen though, and we acknowledge that, so we, like everywhere, have the at-risk programming that are alternative. One of the biggest things we battle is how to keep kids to that point and give them that alternative at-risk programming that's, in their eyes, like a fresh start, right? Because I'm already feeling defeated if I've been behind or I've been lacking a skill for a long time, and I've had all these interventions and these people in my life. So kind of trying to really look at that saying, when I'm making this decision, how do I help students get that fresh start and know there's still hope for graduation? That's kind of always in my mind and my heart that I look for.
Our goal, as Jill said, is always to kind of move through those tiers and to focus on this restrictive environment. And by the time we've gotten to tier 3, and Jill's going to talk a little bit about some of the specific programming options, I mean, we should have exhausted all of the options below that. But I do want to say that there are times things happen in a child's life or in a family's life that require us to move more quickly. Something, a traumatic event, something mental health related. Sometimes it's disciplinary. Sometimes a disciplinary event happens, and as a team, we sit back and say, hey, this kid wasn't necessarily on my radar in the way that some other students are, but this event is requiring me to look at this student's programming in a different way, and we might move up that tier more quickly in those really specific situations.
Would you mind if I add something about tier 2?
Yeah, I
So-
mean, no, I don't mind.
So the K4, probably K4 the most, principals have worked really hard to shift their intervention schedule around a little bit at the tier 2 level. And one of the things that has been a lot of past practice was pulling those kids out and doing literacy and math interventions kind of in a pull-out group. They've worked really hard this year to start pushing those interventionists into the classroom. And so almost I would say of all 5 schools are all doing a version of Push In this coming fall, where they're pushing the interventionists in the classroom to work with more kids, to kind of get at that universal level, but those kids that need that extra set of support. And the thing that I love about that is those people are like the experts in that area, right? And now they're sharing that knowledge with the classroom teacher, and then the classroom teacher is picking up on some of those skills. And so I'm super excited about that. Fair Park was kind of the trailblazer in that regard, and they shifted their whole schedule, and then a bunch of other principals came in and kind of looked at what was going on and are taking pieces of that back to their school. So in the tier 2 area, we're doing some shifts, but I think it's really cool.
You know, in addition to the benefit of, and I appreciate that you said that, because there's the benefit to the teachers when you have a specialist in your classroom, they learn from each other, whether it's a special education teacher, an EL teacher, a literacy interventionist. But the other thing, when I think about decreasing the likelihood of continued at-risk factors, that's the more we can keep kids in their classroom with their peers, the more they establish that sense of belonging. You know, when you think about when kids are exiting and entering a classroom multiple times throughout the day, they're missing things.
Singled out too.
Exactly, and they feel less connected than, or they're at risk to feel less connected. And so that's, I mean, one of my favorite things about that model is it's really about serving kids where we want them to feel like they belong. And that's why even though we have multiple options that we're gonna talk about at that top tier, you know, that's the last place we wanna go. Because even though there's sometimes benefit, it gives kids a new start, you know, they have a different opportunity moving forward, we're still removing them from the place that the majority of their peers are finding success. So we're really careful about making those decisions.
So what would you expect if your student would meet 2 or more of these criteria? And this is just kind of a broad diagram that we want all the schools in the district to follow. Just making sure that parents are having a written notification, for sure. Making sure that school teams are working together to make that determination. And again, typically you should have been meeting with the family, right? You have parent-teacher conferences, you may have a conference with a small team, coming up with those plans, what it's gonna look like, how we're gonna support them. Even giving some suggestions to families, what they can do to help support outside the school. For the at-risk coordinator, so for this, just so you know, we have an at-risk coordinator at the high school only. That does work with me to collaborate and talk to our middle school, so we are getting some collaboration of who's coming up where they're at, where their plans are at. But we are, really when that at-risk coordinator comes to our team to help strategize, they're really bringing in what are some of those alternative options, and at times then they, with the team, are sitting down again with the family if things are not going well, or if a traumatic event happens and we are moved right to the top tier, and we have to really sit with families and say, hey, we don't want to pick off the crap. What do we need to do? What are some options that are out there that best meets their needs as well as their interests? That's just kind of a, again, broad thing that we share with our schools to make sure that they understand their legal compliance. If you go to the next slide, so this is an example though of a flow chart that we are sharing with our, sorry.
Local control plus.
Oops, I just made.
That's like the
Opposite of what you have here. That's so funny.
But I want to comment on my flexible problem solving skills. I have no idea why I tried smaller to make it bigger, but it's worked.
That was really good. So this is just, again, to allow some visual for our high school staff to understand when we're doing identification, some of those key areas and what needs to happen. All right, so just, I don't wanna target some of the like truancy, okay? So again, truancy, whenever a kid is identified as truant, we meet with the family, we try to develop a plan of what the school's gonna do, what the student's gonna do, what the family's gonna do in response to some of the issues. In addition to that is if the truancy has now caused credit deficiency, we now need to come up with an academic plan of how are we gonna recoup this, how are we gonna get you back on track in the classroom, not just getting to school. There's always kind of two, that's why those arrows are kind of going both directions. So same thing with adjudicated youth, teen parents. What is the event or the issues that are causing some of the delays? What is it, what's happening? Is it just access to school? Is it your academic skills are going down, your social skills, your behavior skills are increasing? You know, where are we at as a system? So it's really looking at multiple different things and making sure, again, a team of people are looking at this with multiple different lenses and saying, hey, what is the big need? What do we need to do? And then meeting with the family to really talk about that. Typically, our counselors will start with those conversations, but then we bring the team together. On the bottom, I know it's really small and I apologize, but that is every year we share out with our high school staff, like what does it mean to be credit deficient in your grade? So that families and students kind of know what does that mean. Credit deficiency, when you really think of that word, it doesn't mean I can't get back up, but it means I'm really at risk already of not meeting my graduation requirements. Right, so, and I know this sounds, but I get kids all the time. I have a move-in right now, senior move-in with 1 credit. There's not enough years to go your traditional route to get a graduation, right? There isn't. There's no mathematical way the child can do as many classes as they possible if there's no mathematical way at this point. And those are the situations where we sit and we're going, okay, this kid moved in, we're gonna put him right at tier 3. We gotta come up with a plan because we still know in order for them to be successful past high school, we need to get them to graduate. And we need to give them some skills that make them feel successful to graduate and have a plan. So, I mean, please understand that those things happen to us all the time. And we also know that these students that are coming in, they're new to the environment, they're sometimes angry that they have to move, they don't like school, they're very open about it. So how do you get them past some of that emotional piece of school to really help them find some success?
Perfect segue.
Yeah, perfect segue. So when we look at students, whether it is, again, just students at risk, whether it's sometimes a very significant mental health issue that is going on, so sometimes it's environmental and being able to handle the environment. Sometimes there's medical concerns that does not allow our students to go to school all day. We look at a continuum of services that we have, and in addition to what I'm going to highlight, we look at things like off-site tutoring with teachers certain people who come in and work with our kids, sometimes in the community, sometimes home-based. We tend to like to do it more community-based, just one, to get them out, but also just a neutral place that allows them to focus. So a lot of times we use like the library as low boarding cubbies, things like that. Our district office, we have multiple different individual tutorings and small group tutorings that are going on with educated teachers that help at times work one-on-one with students individually on subjects, or sometimes try to keep them connected to the school and the curriculum being given to them from that teacher if we are planning on getting them back to that classroom. We have online classes, lesson online that kids can access if they can't go to school in the building full day. How can we do a combination of some sort? We do a lot of work-based experiences, both on school grounds and in the community, to allow students to have a different type of learning experience, as well as having some community recreation supports. That could range. I have a student last year that could not handle the unstructured of like a gym class, but needed movement. And we had a Boys and Girls Club support person who was willing to give take that student to the YMCA during the day when it was really quiet, no peers, and do some physical activities, and really get that, that engagement with the student. So that's kind of what I mean by like community recreation supports, that those are things that we consider. All those things come out of really listening to the student and what they need, what their interests are, and what they're kind of willing to do. The last thing we need to do is make a plan without their input and know that it's not gonna work.
I want to mention, we're gonna go through a couple slides that talk about things that are like more of a program. But what is important to me in this continuum of services is that everybody understands that, and Jill's a master at this, we're often creating a program based upon the needs of an individual kid. Very often throughout the year, a situation occurs where we don't have like, oh, here's a program that matches all your needs. It's really, what does this student need? How are we gonna be responsive? And, we're often thinking about the academic piece and getting kids ready for post-secondary learning, but the recreational piece is important too. When you think about being a well-rounded individual, sometimes we're having to teach kids, like, how do you utilize the YMCA? How can you utilize some of these community recreational facilities to kind of strengthen your physical and mental well-being? So it's really, well, when we talk about continuum, it's continuum of very individualized services, and we have some pretty creative people who come up with experiences for kids that truly, it's a unique plan, we haven't done it before. So, but we're gonna talk, Jill's gonna talk you through a couple of our primary program options.
Yeah, so these are just some that we want to highlight at the high school level and some of the successes that we had looking at last school year. So this was our highest number of students in this program since I think 2012. And unfortunately, this was a gap of COVID and a lot of families that decided to go use online for a while and didn't really use offline the way it was meant to be. Not even through us, but through other places. And then we got, unfortunately, a lot of students who had deficiency. And also, a lot of students had some significant mental health issues in that isolated time. So we have 56 kids enrolled in this program, and it is primarily only students in 12th grade, and it is students that have been identified as credit deficient. So as of last year, you going into senior year would not have had 15 and a half credits at that point. Therefore, you could not statistically make up enough credits to that for that time. As well as in this program, you have to take a test to show you have that ninth grade reading level. So you have a high school age reading level. And they do that, it's a state criteria for this program, because they know the test that you have to take, you are at risk of not passing them and you set them up for failure if you didn't have that reading level. So we have two programs that run. There's a morning session and afternoon session. Kids go to school for approximately 3 hours every day. And the other half of the day, they have to complete 15 hours a week in one or more, or a combination. The other half of the day is really trying to get them to be connected and successful in transition to life. So we have some students that do go to the high school. I had a student this year that is really wants to go into the autos or tech ed and had taken 3 tech ed classes. So we kept them connected to the high school because that really is the best for his transition. We have a lot of students that do the extra 15 hours in a work base. So they're in a community job, earning the work credit and experiences. We have some students that do volunteer work, which we also access, or other combination. Anything in there that really is going to help them in transition to life. Example of that is you can even use other 15 hours. Some of your hours meeting with like a social worker. If you have a social worker, if you're meeting with a counselor, if you're part of an Elevate group that you may be meeting with to really work on your AOD issues that you've had in the past. We want you to engage in that because we know that needs to be taken care of and you need to be in a good place to be a successful, independent adult. So we accept all those within the 15 hours. A lot of kids choose work, but we do have a lot that do a combination. So of our 56 kids that were enrolled in this program, anywhere between September and March, we accept applicants up to that point, because sometimes kids fall behind mid-year or didn't want to go in the program initially and then decided to. 53 of them graduated. Our graduation rate was just short of 95%, which, if you think of these 56 kids, these are all kids that were not set up to graduate. So I have to tell you, part of what I feel is the success of the program is, it's kind of like I would say like a kumbaya moment, right? They're all in the same place. No one's questioning it. You're not looking around saying, am I the only one that is credit deficient? We all know where we're at, and we're all here for the same purpose. We want to get done, graduate, and get out. And I will say, I always joke around, that program is one of those where it's so quiet, the kids are so focused down there. My heels when I walk through are the loudest thing that happened. I always feel like I'm a disturbance. But it is definitely one of our programs I feel very passionate about, because we have had a lot of good successes. And part of that is the staff and their passion for it. Part of it is, again, the kids feel they have a fresh start. And that's the biggest thing, because now you are no longer on making 22.5 credits. It's competency-based and completion of a program. But you do get a regular diploma, which also makes them feel good, and they can want graduation. And I would just say one more thing about it. One of my favorite things about that program is every student at the end does a presentation and shares a portfolio that they create. That portfolio shares out some of the things they did within the program, some of the things they learned about themselves in the program. But then they also share out their next plans. What happens tomorrow? What happens next month? What happens next year? They have to kind of develop and look forward to what do I want to do? What are my interests? What did I learn about myself? And I think having the time in the program to really self-reflect is one of the biggest things that they need. Kind of take a really hard look at my life and what I want to become. So,
Those are pretty powerful moments
They
when
are.
they present those.
and a lot of tears from parents. We're probably like my favorite part of the day. You go to the next one.
Yep, I just moved.
Thank you. So there are times that students, we offer the GETO2 program as that alternative, and there are some kids that just, whether it's environment, whether it's just behavioral incident that happened, that maybe we don't feel comfortable with them being within our school environments. There are still some students that, for whatever reason, the programs don't work, and we still have to utilize our HSED program up at Learning Park. I still like that. Again, the 7 students that were enrolled in here were 7 students. I think all of them had under 5 credits. Some were moving, some were not, some were kids that went homeschool for multiple years, didn't go to school, and I had to come back and learn how to do school. Didn't want to be in a school environment, but wanted to know how could I graduate. They don't get a typical diploma, but they do get the high school equivalent through the state. So it's a state diploma instead of a West Bend School District diploma. But of the 7 that went, all 7 completed it, and before the whole year, like within a 3 to 6 month window, which was really impactful. The nice thing about that program is there's at top end 8 kids to 1 teacher. Usually it's 4 to 1, and that teacher up there is amazing. And kids really get the one-on-one that they need. So this is the first year I think that we have 100% graduation rate, so we're really happy with that. But again, that's our pretty much one of our last years, but we know there are some things that need it. We talked about a little bit about what do we do before this point? What do we do before they're seniors and they're not going to graduate? And one of the programs that we do utilize is PACE. And PACE is the Personalized Academic Credit Education. So they're really looking at earning credits. Every kid has a different plan in PACE. So at times, some of the kids are coming in there and they're working on earning credits and gaining skills in my language arts and maybe some of the classes that would benefit me if I'm going to go to GETO2. So I already know I'm pretty credit efficient, and kind of trying to boost their confidence in themselves and show them that you can get into this program and be in a good place. There are times they're just in there to get additional math and reading assistance and make up credits so they can get back on track to maybe be the next year with their peers in language arts 11th grade, right? So they don't have to go back as a 12th grader and take a 9th grade class. I will tell you, that's the biggest thing I can do to make it. If I want someone to fail, I can take my 11th, 12th grade and say, you're gonna go with freshman and redo those classes. They will not do that. So again, this is kind of a range. We have a teacher that's an at-risk teacher and a paraprofessional in there, and they work so nicely in conjunction with the kids. Kids are kind of working on their own personalized stuff, but then they do have some group little mini lessons. Sometimes it's even mini lessons on study skills and executive functioning skills that you could see every kid is maybe struggling with. Two other programs that we have for students at younger ages is our individualized credit recovery and our literacy principles class. So the ICR is really, our at-risk coordinator heads it with 2 instructional tasks, and this is for students that have failed credits and are willing to remediate or make up the credit or redo the credit. This
So
again,
they failed like a required
they
course.
fail a required course, so maybe I end up failing biology semester 2. If the kid is willing, we put them back in the class first, because the primary teacher is really who we want the instruction to come through. But this is where I'm saying that there are these kids that, due to emotional like stress about it, sometimes about just the whole group instruction piece of it, sometimes they just balance their day with what's easier, like I can't handle whole instruction all day, how do I balance my day? This allows them to do, it's an online program called Edgenuity that we utilize, but with 3 teacher supports. And so every hour we approximately have 15 to 20 students in there for 3 adults. And we had 175 kids that were enrolled in the program last year. We were able to recoup 351 credits. So it's a pretty good success. For me, the best thing about this program that we are going to take the model and utilize now in a structured study hall format is they have daily, weekly, monthly goal sheets. They, the student makes. The teacher follows up on it and gives suggestions, but really try to get them to have some like insight every day. Hey, why didn't you meet your goal? What could you do differently tomorrow? It's kind of helping them understand on task, off task at times. And then again, how did you feel when you met your goal? If you feel really good about yourself, that's awesome. I'm super proud of you. Look at you finished this class, you did it. Just kind of helping them reflect. Our literacy principles class. So this is a class designed for students who are typically more than 3 years behind their peers in language arts. And a lot of students are kids that, for whatever reason, missed out on some of the skills or are lacking in a little, maybe a specific target area. Maybe they can do comprehension, but they struggle with figurative language. But we know they don't have that 9th grade reading level at this time to be able to be eligible for some of our alternative programs. As well as, we know the higher your reading level, any class you take in the high school is gonna help your success rate, right? I go into social studies classes and it's written, all the stuff is written at a 9th grade or higher level. So we wanna make sure that they're at that level so they don't go into classes frustrated. We had 12 kids in the first semester, 13 kids in the second semester, 19 of the 25 kids graduated or enrolled in programs towards graduation. So we were able to take 19 of those kids and really boost up their reading levels. The literacy principles class is a block class. It's a 2-period class that is targeted specifically. They do part whole group on skills and then part individualized where their discrepancies are. So it really is targeted for that specific student. Again, these are just a couple of the programs. I didn't want to overwhelm, but what my hope was is to show you guys, there's a lot of interventions that take place for students. Do we still have kids that fall through the cracks? Unfortunately, yes. We know that's sometimes where the truancy piece comes in, right? If you're not there, I can't help you with any of these programs. And the truancy is a whole other battle that we work towards every year. We meet with families and we meet with the county, we meet with our community school districts as well. We all kind of work on what are you doing, what's working for you type of thing. So I guess I end with, do you guys have any questions and or, because again, this is kind of newer to me, anything that you would want me to modify, change, or share differently or share additionally when we take this to the board on Monday?
And what would be the key elements? I mean, we included more here, knowing that we were gonna have some opportunity to engage in discussion, but when you think about what's gonna be important for us to share with our community in that format, what would those recommendations be? And or other recommendations or thoughts for us as we continue to do this work on behalf of, a small but important group of kids in our system.
I'm just so proud of everything you do, for kids that maybe society doesn't take into consideration or might otherwise feel forgotten or not served. I'm so proud that we do right by these kids, and setting them up to be the most successful adults that they can be is so important because, once they leave us, who knows what's gonna happen. So, I mean, it's like the last chance.
Yeah, I always say it, so to Emily, one of the things that I think in my heart has been the best is, I've been in the district for 21 years, aging myself, but I'm lucky enough to be able to have a lot of students that have gone through our programs come back and have kids of their own and see them be successful adults in the community, and that, I had some rough years where I wasn't your traditional successful student, but I made it out on the end, and this is why. And they come back, they like to show their children off, they like to.
And these are the
You know.
kids that are most likely to stay in our community as
Correct.
well. I mean, we
Correct.
educate a lot of kids that they're gonna go leave and, be productive somewhere else. These are kids that are gonna be around and,
And those moments, I think about when I'm engaging in conversations that are more disciplinary related and, we have kids. And I'll be honest, when I think about this year, the majority of those kids have been between the ages of 10 and 14. And when I sit at the table, I always start by saying, this doesn't define who you are. This action doesn't define who you are or who you will become. And I think that's really important, and Jill does a really good job of communicating this and keeping that message within the community. And I will tell you, I have felt very supported by our board when we've had to make hard decisions on behalf of kids, to remember that every single one of these kids they bring value. I always think about, that is somebody's child I'm speaking about. And every single one of them have the potential to be something beyond, whatever struggle they're having in the moment. And that's where that ability to really personalize what we do throughout that journey is important, because, the story behind the experience the child is having is unique to them. So it's nice to have, we've got some program options, and then we've got some awesome people we employ, and most of our tutors are some of our best retired people who weren't ready to give it up, and they come back and they invest in these kids in a way that I think is pretty unique, beyond just the learning. I mean, we have tutors who are constantly saying, I'm worried this child is going without something. Can I support this, or can I help? So it's really that whole wraparound, not just about the academics, but what does this child need for the next step forward. So in our board, I have felt extremely supported in that when we've had to make hard decisions on behalf of kids.
we see the recovery efforts, and that there's no giving up on anyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it all sounds really great, I suppose most of these kids that get into these situations, it's not like a fault of their own usually, right? It's like something going on in their life or they've experienced, and so it's great to see that there's teachers and staff kind of wrapping around them and, being a point of encouragement or whatever.
So recommendations, when you think about, this was a lot, and obviously we can't replicate this at the large school board meeting, but what would be kind of your recommendations in terms of what's going to be most impactful in that discussion?
I like the individualized aspect of it, but also presenting the various tools that you have to work from. So it's a combination of what's available for you to work with, but also customizing it to each kid and being flexible.
So maybe we target some of the programs, just do a briefer highlight, these are a couple of things that are options, a couple of celebrations, and then talk about that individual.
I think the celebrations are gonna be important. And I really like recognizing also the staff that works with these kids. I mean, I can't imagine going to work every day and having to go through security and, you know, you don't know what you're gonna be, I mean, just,
Our staff.
that would be traumatizing to me to do once, let alone every day for my job.
Tony, were you on the board when I presented a couple years ago, like, about Washington Street School and like,
Yeah.
did the, my plan is to do that again. I think that, again, a lot of them don't work in the community, but
Right.
also just like really the cool things that happen there, they're not just.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing to acknowledge because, you know, but we do want to celebrate it and show appreciation for the people that are willing to do that. Because, yeah, these kids are young, and like Melanie said, you know, it could have been just one thing that happened that, I mean, by the grace of God, none of the mistakes I've made have gotten me into that kind of trouble, so.
Yes, I think, you know, it's sometimes the one thing that happened, and sometimes it's also the things that didn't happen on behalf of the child.
Yeah.
You know, that led them to that path, and, you know, for every single one of those kids, I mean, especially when we're talking about, and we've had 10-year-olds in our jail.
14, like.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to have things in place to move them in a different direction, because they all bring value. And I legitimately, every time I sit at a table and have those conversations, you know, that idea of that's somebody's kid and they love that child as much as I love mine. And how do we move them forward? How do we wrap around them?
And we don't know what they might be capable of in the future, having had that experience, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, families are trying to do the best they can on behalf of their kids, and sometimes those plans also include how can we support that family. Most often, it's when we're talking about our tier 3 kids within this at-risk programming, it really is, it's a partnership with the family. And how can we help you, and how can you help us know how to best serve your child? So, I know that was a lot.
I don't know if we gave you enough feedback to
Yeah.
help with your
Well, I-
We'll try to
presentation.
cut it down a little bit.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about I think as a school board, our school board needs to understand, like, these are the requirements. There are 6 requirements, and you can meet those requirements in lots of different ways. This is how we do it, and I think it's really talking about that continuum of services and acknowledging that starts early on in terms of responding to kids who are struggling as learners or struggling to meet grade level expectations, and then really talking about, you know, how do we personalize and individualize to meet the needs of kids?
And is this is separate from like a special education piece, is that for different?
It is, but you know, Melanie,
But I suppose it
sometimes,
can be kind of like
yeah,
linked together too.
sometimes these are students with disabilities. I mean, sometimes, you know, we're serving a student who, you know, is identified with an emotional behavioral disability or might be identified with a specific learning disability, and they become at risk. So sometimes those overlap, and Jill said this early on, and I think it's important to reiterate, if you're a student with a disability and you're simultaneously receiving at-risk programming, we are obligated to implement that IEP. So the IEP requirement doesn't change if we're servicing them here or, yeah.
And then you think about like your team, when you come together for an IEP team, it may look a little different because now you kind of have the dual looking, yeah, so you might be, adding some extra people to that meeting that maybe one that came before, but now we really know we need them for that wraparound.
And this is an investment that I think is important in our community, but people don't understand that it is preventing greater expenses to our community down the road.
Yeah.
And it's not part of your typical parochial school or,
So Tanya, I just want to highlight that as an example. So 2 years ago, we really added the PACE literacy principles and ICR. I will tell you, our group next year for GO2, right now, is almost looking half what we had this year. So the interventions are working, right? We're catching some of those gaps. Those kids do not have to be credit deficient by senior year, can stay in the typical school environment, go to, which Janet Hadley is our at-risk coordinator, and her and I always sat down and we're like, what a great problem to have.
yeah.
Like we have lots of kids, right? Like awesome, which also opens our door to utilize some of the teaching staff for, again, special cases that we need to be really creative about. But as much as I was super sad to see the Fish Six last year, our teachers rose up to that and they really, and I will say of the 3 that did not graduate, 2 of them have contacted me this summer. It was very life circumstances, supporting themselves and having to work full-time plus, and school was not a priority, and they both begged to come back in the fall to finish up. So my hope is that that group will actually have 55 out of 56 that will graduate, which is amazing. But
Actually, I think that would be a good, the statistic that what you're doing is making it so that there are fewer, that would be something
lessening
good to present.
Yeah.
The success rate.
All right, well, thank you. I know that was a lot. It won't be that much when we come to the board, but, in your board report,
You're gonna be writing,
Or don't forget.
Well, and we'll still give this to the
Yeah.
board. So like, I mean, that's been some of the state criteria stuff is. I'll try to talk less.
No, that was nice.
No, it's all good.
It's excellent to have, and that's why the committee exists, because these 2 board members have a deeper knowledge of the information of the criteria and are also a go-to for board members that would like to know a little bit more, as are you. But for you 2 to represent, we really appreciate that because you do have a deeper knowledge now of these things, and that's important. Thank you.
All right, I will adjourn the meeting. 10:17.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You good, Jennifer?